Okay, good morning, still morning? Yep, just about good morning, everybody. My name's Stuart Newstead. I run a consultancy these days called Ellare, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a moment. I'm here primarily, though, because in the period of the late 90s and early 2000s, I was at O2. It wasn't necessarily called O2 at that time, which we'll also talk about. And I ran what was called our 2.5G, our GPS strategy and operations. So I was in charge of the GPRS program itself, I was in charge of the commercial strategy, and I was in charge of the business products. We didn't really have any consumer products. As a big disclaimer, I had nothing to do with the 3G license bid, nothing to do with the amount that we paid for it. I had nothing to do with consumer WAP, which I'm going to slag off shortly. And so I suppose, just building on what I think Graham was saying about generals or foot soldiers, I suppose I was sort of in charge of a new model army that we were trying to create at O2 to get us from this voice world into this data world. Having said that, listening to the talks this morning, which have been excellent, it feels a bit with some of the confessions like it's a bit of one of those hearings of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I'll probably add to that as well. Also, I should say that before I was at O2, I was at BT Wholesale, and I ran what was called commercial operations. So I actually since the mid-90s, dealt with the mobile operators as well as the other operators. And so more than happy to talk about that on the panel. But primarily, obviously, I'm being asked to talk about the transition from voice to data. I'm just going to say a brief word because I run a consultancy. Here we go. We've done it since 2002. And just interestingly, looking at this, the range of customers, it's a good example of reinforcing what Mike Short was saying earlier about how the industry has broadened and what is now touched by communications. And these are all genuine clients that we've had over the many years, and also how global things are. I've got clients, or had clients in over 20 countries. So you can see how broad, this was just going to be a sales pitch, but background, but you can see how broad the industry now is through my own experience in running this consultancy for the last 13 years or so. But let's come back a little bit to the times as they were. We're talking about I suppose the late 90s, and to use a bit of Dickens, it's partly the best of times, because what we're talking about is that period then. So around about 1999, we at that time were fully owned by BT. Securicor had sold out its stake to BT, and at one point the BT share price, for those of us who had shares because of our employment, reached £15. Okay, then 15 quid. And what happened was it went shooting up. I remember it very well indeed. It went shooting up on the back of a press release. And that press release said that O2, was in BT Cellnet, were in discussions with FreeServe. Basically, we were having a cup of tea with FreeServe, and it put the BT share price up by about £1 on that day. So as a reminder of the hype that we were living through at that time, on the back of the first dot-com boom, mobile was starting to get a bit more at the centre of things. The 3G licenses were going to be awarded. As you can see, they hadn't yet been awarded. BT share price rapidly moved away from 15 quid once the 3G share price, once this 3G licenses were awarded. So in a sense, it was the best of times. A lot of excitement, lots of things changing. Lots of my colleagues saying to me, Stuart, you don't get it. It's a new economics. We don't need to make money. And I'm kind of, okay, I don't get it. And then, so it's partly the best of times, but also it was the worst of times. And I noticed outside on the couple of billboards, I'm surprised they've all not been burned, the Surf the BT Cellnet WAP man. What a waste of time that was. And you can see here, it's a bit hard to read the bottom things from the audience. So advertise. So we, I'm using collective we, nothing to do with me. Had this thing. We tried a big WAP launch. It was completely misguided. I think a number of speakers earlier have talked about the importance of having the right devices and the right networks and the right applications. The network wasn't really there. We were still developing GPRS. The phones certainly weren't there, and the applications weren't there. What WAP was something, a very simple thing that should have been positioned as being simple. See, so I'll just have to read out the last bit, but it might be a bit hard for you to see in the audience. So Advertising that tricks users into believing they can surf the internet on a mobile phone has put back WAP take-up in Britain by 6 months, according to analysts and WAP users. WAP is about simple data access, and that is what they should have said. When you overhype, you're left with disappointed customers. Quite right. And that was from ZDNet back in November 2000. And it also reminds me, Mike and I have been very close colleagues and friends over the years, of the changes that we went through. And it was Cellnet, then, I don't know, whoever had the great idea that people clearly associated BT at that time with fantastic customer service. Therefore, we'll add BT to the name Cellnet. It'll be a complete winner. It was such a winner that in the '99 World Cup, as Mike was mentioning about the rugby, BT was so embarrassed with its association with Cellnet that it wouldn't let the rugby players have the words BT Cellnet. If you dig out a rugby shirt from 1999 World Cup, it says Cellnet on it, even though the company was BT Cellnet. It was that embarrassing from the BT side. So, and one other thing that happened, we were all trying, not just us, it was all the mobile operators, were trying to create walled gardens for content. And it was going to be all about the mobile operators and walled gardens. I remember us having massive arguments with AOL about things like this. And I've got a slide, the next slide is one, it's from a few years later, but it shows how deluded we were about that walled gardens and controlling the value chain was going to be the answer. I think who was it? It was Graham. One of the early presentations said that, it was Stephen, that the French realised that 100% of a tiny market is a lot worse than 10% of a big market. And at the time, we were 100% of a tiny market. And what happened literally overnight, this is slightly later on, but it just shows what happened when the tidal wave could come along. In 2007, accessing a site on a mobile phone, the most popular way popular is probably not the right word, the most prevalent way of doing it was via a carrier site. So the Vis-a-Vis or Genie, things like that. Within a year, it had gone down from 1st to 10th, and then the real world took over. And that's actually been the best thing that happened to mobile networks anyways. So you can see that we were partly deluded. We were moving forward very quickly. We were developing very rapidly, but we had, I think, delusions of grandeur, and we were getting ahead of ourselves with marketing, and there's quite a lot of internal tensions, and it may make some of us think about developing a second career. And my own second career happened, I thought of, start a page 3 career, why not? What else could you do? And so my page 3 career started on the 18th of, it started and finished on the 18th of April 2001. And sadly, it was in the Financial Times. Now what happened was, on the 15th of April 2001, I was still on this fantastic skiing holiday with my family and some friends and friends' families. Brilliant, first time we'd done it. And we were in North America, so I'd flown back. I was really jet lagged. All I wanted to be was a ski bum. So I walked into the office. The last place I wanted to be was in the office. And somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, are you ready for tomorrow's press conference?" And I'm like, I had no idea what they were talking about. It wasn't my product, it was a WAP thing. It was nothing. I said, eventually I said, "Oh, what, is it in the plan?" First I've heard of it, I've been away. And they said, "Yeah." I said, "All right, well, if you've got this place lined up and everything, all the press are coming, we want to put on a really good show." And I said, "Okay, all right, so where's my script? Where's the material we should say?" And then that was his turn to look blankly at me and say, "Oh," I said, "Okay, all right." So we put something together, and as you do, we tried to prepare it very carefully, and the next morning we were there, all went very well, held the assembled press, I did my bit, and I'd agreed with our PR people. We had sort of demo stuff at the back, it was WAP phones, and I'd said, right, I'm going to reach a point, and I'm going to say, and now I've got time for one last question, and at that point, I want you at the back of the room to give me a thumbs up if the demo's working, and a thumbs down if it's not. Okay? And I said, if it's a thumbs up, then I will say, I've got time for one last question, and then let's go and have a cup of coffee and look at this stuff in action. And if the thumb was down, it was going to be, let's have a cup of coffee and have a further chat. Okay? So, all goes swimmingly. I've now got time for one last question. Let's go and have a cup of coffee after that and have a look at the demo. Between that and getting in there, it stopped working. And that's what happened, right? Now, and you know, as all of you are celebrities, I'm sure a lot in the media, if somebody takes a photo, if they take quite a lot of photos, they can get that photo to reflect any particular mood that they want, okay? Now, I've got no idea what, and you can see I tried to burn this. I found this the other day. I've had to burn it. And actually, ironic, I had no idea about the bit at the bottom, which is kind of symbolic as well. After the disruption, confusion, and problems, something else unexpected. Anyways, and what also apparently had happened was that the guy who wrote the article, Dan Roberts, he had a big argument, I think, with the BT PR people. We didn't know at all. We were just O2 people. So, you know, any chance he had to stick the boot in was going to happen. And we didn't know anything about, I didn't know anything about this till later on in the day. So it was a certainly very interesting 24 hours. As it actually happened, the next day, the BBC picked it up. And they ran it on the lunchtime news, and I had to go on the lunchtime news. And it actually worked out really well in our favour. I had to go on the lunchtime news. But because the story got shortened by something else coming up front first, I can't remember what it was. And so instead of him saying, oh, here you got this demo that went wrong, please explain yourself, he just said, oh, tell us about all this mobile future stuff. So it sounded like we were sort of, you know, great thought leaders and stuff like that. So I'm actually quite thankful to the FT for promoting my career in that way. So that's kind of, you know, it's not all about me, as they say. So let's talk about the proper stuff here and what was going on. So why bother? Why bother with this new thing called GPRS? And I ought to say, I'm not a technical person, right? Those in the room who know me will know I'm not a technical person, and those who don't know me yet will realise very quickly that I'm not a technical person. This is very simple, stick man on the left, and maybe a little computer on the right. The thing is that you could always send some emails or messages to people over GSM. It's just that you had a dedicated circuit. That was it. So if you had an hour saying nothing to each other, you would still use an hour of that circuit. So it was a completely inefficient use of resource. And so when the idea of GPRS was that it would be far more align the usage with the network usage. So it would be far more economically efficient. The fundamental economics would be far closer, and therefore be far more efficient use of network in a data world when you send and receive information, even when you talk, actually, because you have lots of periods of silence. And so here, I've just got, the idea is that on the top line, you've got somebody maybe typing something, and then on the bottom line, you've got stuff coming down the downlink, so bits of a web page or whatever it might be. And so this, from my, I'd been asked to look at the commercial strategy for all this, and this was the first thing that struck me, that it seemed to be far closer to the underlying economics, so that you could make a more sensible business case around data and data-centric services. It's just a lot more efficient. I have to say, we were slightly concerned at the time. It was all, is it GPRS or is high-speed circuit switch data got something to offer? And we were quite worried about Orange and what they were doing with high-speed circuit switch data. So in a slightly, not quite desperate move, but it only cost me a few quid, I bought the domain hscsd.co.uk and repointed it at O2's home page. I don't know how many hits it got, but it sort of took a bit away of the bit of the worry. So you could increase the efficiency of network usage. And then the other thing is, and it wasn't just one person you could deal with, you could deal with multiple users at the same time. And you could have them sitting alongside each other and bring them together. So you had massive elements of increased efficiency, and you could run it alongside GSM as well. So it's a way of opening up. We saw it as a way of opening up the GSM network. As one of my colleagues said, one of my more technical colleagues said to me, he said, it's a bit like taking a £60 million screwdriver to our network. We still use the same spectrum, we still use the same base station, the same masts, the same underlying technology. It's mainly a software change. So it's a very rapid move, in the scheme of things, very rapid move to allow us to move from a voice-centric world into one that could have data as well. And also, we didn't realise this at the time, but it gave us massive learning about some of the opportunities and perils around that were going to come with 3G. Because at the time, mostly people thought 3G would have a massive early launch, and everybody would be using it within weeks, forgetting that you had to build a completely new radio network to go with it. You had to get completely new devices. It was hard enough to get GPRS to work. And as Mike alluded to in his talk, we were in this hype world, remember? And at O2 we were kind of second of two, Vodafone well ahead on voice, and we really felt we had to really push on data to make a mark in the market, and this was maybe our opportunity. Vodafone might have their eyes more on the voice side, and we could be more focused on data. We really pushed very hard to create a high touch sales team, and of data centric people. And as Mike touched on, we did announce we launched the world's first GPRS network. Now clearly, when you've covered 6 miles of the Thames Valley between Slough and Maidenhead, then the rest is pretty much detail about the rest of the UK. So we were very confident about that public announcement, and it kind of we built along from there. Now we then, but it wasn't. There were certain exciting moments, and I think it was the very first talk that we had or it might have been Andy, when he was sort of saying that there are certain wow moments, even if for those of us who work in the industry, and it's quite rare that you sort of do something that's really quite intense and you suddenly go, wow, that is amazing. And I genuinely had a wow moment. I'm going to come on to BlackBerry in a moment, but this is a wow moment about GPRS and roaming. I'd been out to Munich to talk to my German colleagues about roaming trials and talk to them about BlackBerry and things like that. And I was standing in the security line at Munich Airport to come back. In those days, I had a phone, and I had an earpiece for the phone, and then we were trialing a BlackBerry as well. And I had a phone call. And so I was speaking to a guy in my ear, and it was an analyst, and he was in Toronto. He was analysing BlackBerry, Research in Motion, as they were then called. And they used to ring me quite a bit. And we were talking about it and how it was going. And I said, we're just starting to trial GPRS roaming. I said, look, you're not allowed to write about this, but let's just try it and see what happens. So, bear in mind, I'm talking to him in my ear, and I've got my BlackBerry here, different device. And I said to him, just what's your email address? And his name is Chris Umiastowski. So the longest bit of the whole conversation was me. He's a good friend to this day. Was me trying to type his email address correctly. Anyways, so I typed his email address and just sent a message on the BlackBerry that said hi. And 2 seconds later, in my ear, I heard a ping, and it was the email landing in his inbox in Toronto. And he and I both said 2 very short words. And it was just the most amazing moment. I could not believe it. I was standing, could have been anywhere in the world. I was actually standing in an airport. It could have been literally anywhere in the world, and he was the other side of the world, and it worked. And I could hear it. It was just an awe-inspiring moment, and a very special moment. So we then, as I said, I'm not a technical person, so I was very much approaching all this from the business side of things. And when I started, people were talking about the throughput and the speed of the actual throughput being the only thing that mattered. And it just didn't feel right. It just did not feel right to me that was the real problem we were trying to solve. It's certainly one of the engineering problems. But from a business perspective, it didn't seem to me to be quite the problem. I couldn't quite figure it out for quite some time what it was that we're trying to solve. And eventually I did. And I want to give an illustration. So imagine a few years ago, and I've left the house. I live in Oxford. Come from Oxford today, and I've left the conference venue details at home. Oh, thank goodness! I've got that email that Nigel Lynch sent me. Let me just dig that out. Okay, and I want to take us back to where this would have been 1999, and at the time, we had a world where people had laptops and you could plug them in and stuff like that. But what would happen? You would spend minutes, hours, trying to find somewhere where you could plug it in. You'd eventually plug it in. You'd eventually maybe find an Ethernet port or a dial-in port as well. You then power up your laptop, which took forever as well. You then put in your password to log onto your laptop. You then maybe have another password for your Outlook, And then there'd be ages where all your emails would synchronize. And that would take ages and ages and ages. And then eventually you could search for one. The one that says Nigel Lynch, and then you'd find it, happy face at the end. Oh, got it, right, there's the venue details. But it's only the very end of that chain that actually involves any kind of network at all. So most of the rest of the time, the problem is finding somewhere where you can even put yourself in a position when you can solve the problem that you face. So then people started to come, when we first talked about GPRS, and we had the PCM, CIA cards and things, and people, the model that people had, it was like a sort of getting a bit of a camel sort of horse designed by committee. Because what was being sold to me was, lots of people had laptops, and so and people thought, well, what you could do is you could stick the PCM card into the slot, and then maybe also have some optimization software on the laptop as well. People like Blue Kite and things. So it kind of, I still think, no, it's just still too complicated. You take away the thing about finding somewhere to sit down, but you still have to power your laptop up, put in a password, then you'd have to open the PCM app, then you'd have to open the optimization app, which you haven't got on here. And you'd always have to do them in the right order. And there was all passwords, and you'd get it wrong, and it's kind of, you'd spend ages doing it. And then it would sync all your emails. And then you could look for the Nigel Lynch one, and then you'd find it, and you'd find the conference venue. So still, a lot of this time, it's almost like a logarithmic scale here. A lot of the time on the left is our sort of human time, which is just getting in a position where you can solve the particular problem that you face, which is, I don't know where the venue is, which is your problem. And finally, what happened? One of my guys, we had a mobile commerce team, well, one person, and he said, I've come across this little Canadian company, and they've got something you might be interested in. Do you want me to set you up a meeting? I said, yeah, okay, all right, sure, whatever. And so they came to see me, and they had this little pager thing, which is an American thing. And this is my second wow moment. Well, it's the first because it predated the other one. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, actually, in a work sense. The only time it's ever happened to me in a work sense. And I thought, this is just what I want. Initially, I couldn't articulate it, but I realized about a week later it solved the problem. The problem it solved was I had instant access to what I wanted. All the stuff was happening in the background. All I had to do was type, even on a 2-line screen like that, all I had to do was type in a password for the device password, search the email or scroll down it, and I'd find it. So the problem was solved. And also then realized what the problem was. And the problem was that my personal clock starts ticking as soon as I think about the problem. I want to find some information. That's when my clock starts ticking. And it goes through ages and ages and ages with these are the first two solutions before I get to the point where I can actually do something about it. My clock finishes ticking when I found the email that says Nigel saying, right, here's the venue, here's the postcode, here's where to park. So all these other solutions were wrong. And so I also then realized that we were trying to solve primarily a business problem at that time, not a consumer problem. And you could develop a business case for it about the time saved and the efficiency gained. And so hence we really focused on BlackBerry. We managed, because we were very focused on it, I managed to lead negotiation about an exclusive deal. Again, slight stretch to say it was European-wide. In those days, O2 was UK, Ireland, Germany and Netherlands. That's kind of pretty much core Europe. Oh, and the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man. Sorry, I should mention the Isle of Man. There's a very good reason to mention the Isle of Man. I'm surprised it hasn't come up yet. Which is, the Isle of Man had the world's first live 3G network. Okay, so much like Australia, it's an unknown island in the middle of nowhere, a long way from anywhere. So it doesn't have much interference, because once you get on the island, you don't have any interference. And we had a closed system. We had an NEC system. We had a base station in the north, the base station in the south, NEC handsets. And genuinely, we could drive people around, journalists and cynical people, all the way around the island. And it was really good. It was a great test bed. It was a great demo and a great facility for us to show people. And yeah, we even did speed test things and things like that. So yeah, so that was the extensive O2 network. But coming back to the BlackBerry side of things, it's absolutely the case that throughput wasn't everything. and that we had started to think about these things in business terms, not just in technical terms. Up till then, in the mobile industry, we weren't perfect at it, but we tended to think, oh, we've got this great technology, people must want to buy it, rather than, well, what's the real problem we're trying to solve? Now, interestingly, this time, and we touched earlier in the previous talk about the difference between North America and Europe, it was absolutely the case. I used to use this in illustrations in talks that if in the late 90s, if you received a business card from an American, it would have an email address on it. And if you received a business card from a European, it would have a mobile number on it, but not both. And that, for me, is a very good indication of how people saw what mobility meant at that time. So mobility to Americans meant finding somewhere you could move around, find somewhere you could look at your emails. Mobility for Europeans, because of GSM, meant using a phone pretty much wherever you wanted. Now, the mobile industry is often accused of not being very innovative, being very slow, but this was a time of great innovation and quite often unexpected innovation. I just want to share some of the tools that were used in the innovation within O2. 4 particular tools here. This is one of the world's first converged mobile phones. It's got a compact iPack on the right-hand side, a Motorola time port on the left-hand side, a WAP phone. Actually, that WAP phone was most useful. It was the world's first tri-band phone. The first phone I could use in America. I'm going to speak at a conference in America and got Motorola to give me one, so I could actually use a phone in America, never mind all that WAP rubbish. So, one end you've got a compact iPack. The other end you've got a Motorola time port. In the middle there you've got a piece of Perspex and a piece of blue tack. And what we did was, fantastic colleagues, my technical team, fantastic, Steve Pluser, John Rogers, people like that, absolute legends. They stuck the Motorola time port onto the Perspex with the blue tack and shoved the Perspex into the card slot of the compact, used Bluetooth and created a connected compact iPack. Absolute genius, and we would demo that at things. And they would walk around. This isn't live, is it good? With a massive piece of Perspex and a time pot sticking on it, and then walk around and every so often ram it into the compact iPack and demo it. So that was brilliant. That was brilliant. The second innovation that we have, the second piece of innovation, was cardboard. I mentioned earlier earlier on that the first BlackBerries, the North American ones, looked like pages. And the thing is, in the States, that at the time, paging networks were two-way. So you could actually run a BlackBerry on a paging network. And obviously in the UK, they were one-way, so we couldn't. So the GPRS model was in development. This isn't quite my original. I had my car broken into once, and somebody nicked my briefcase, and in it was my original BlackBerry. I was just absolutely gobsmacked. I couldn't insure it; it was too expensive to insure. Clearly, it was just too valuable. But anyways, here's a very early days BlackBerry. But obviously, that was in development, so we were desperately trying to get ahead and go into almost like some of the key Vodafone accounts, so Goldman, so people in the city. I remember us going to Goldman's and people like that. JP Morgan, really getting on. The people we thought might be familiar with it from the States, BlackBerry from the States, very email, very information-centric, information-hungry businesses where real-time information is your business. And this is really, we were quite focused, but we didn't have any goddamn devices. What we did have was a cardboard cutout of what the GPRS device was going to look at. I kid you not, we signed 2 contracts on the back of cardboard cutouts, okay? And that was a fantastic innovation. And the third innovation, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with in developing early stage devices, and probably continues to this day, is a paperclip for all the hard resets that you have to do when the thing freezes and doesn't work anymore. Even with all that, we managed to develop a great deal of momentum, great deal of excitement. But it wasn't all plain sailing. That uphill struggle continued for quite some time. Just through some personal contacts, we had a trial, not a full corporate trial, but a sort of almost an individual trial using what was called a redirector with some MPs. We had knew some MPs, and they were clearly lots of information, lots of kind of almost like dead time when you're sitting around in committees or in Parliament. But we got rumbled. And MPs were always thrown out of the Commons if they used their Blackberries in the chamber. Good piece of PR, the fact he said Blackberry rather than just any kind of mobile device. But Speaker Michael Martin has ruled, so that was a shame. But we did have some, at the flip side, we had another trial which was with the staff of the European PGA Golf Tour, they're based down at Wentworth. They're actually a very mobile organisation. If you think about it, what they're doing is they're setting up connectivity at each time they have an event. And the word European is quite a loose term here, because the European Golf Tour, it goes all over the world. But as a complete coincidence, so at this time, so around about 2000, every country that the European Golf Tour went to was a GSM country. I don't know if there's some kind of cross-sponsorship, but it's every single country. So they loved it. And one of the best early emails, they were one of our very first trialists, so it's probably 99. I should have checked this before I came. But I remember getting an email from Ian, the IT director, Ian Barker, from Lytham, Royal Lytham, St Anne's, where the Open was at that time. And he just said, that in the email, I kept it because I used it in loads of presentations, this is so cool. I thought from a corporate customer, that was just, to a technology product, it was just absolutely brilliant. So we started to kind of make some progress, and then finally we got proper acceptance, and the ultimate proper acceptance was Alex cartoon. There are actually at least 3 different types of Alex cartoons. These are Financial the City cartoons. They're I think they're these days in the Telegraph, were in the Independent before. I've got 2 of the originals, and I bought another original, gave it to my friend Rick Costanzo, who's the sales guy from BlackBerry. And what would happen, the way that Alex cartoons were done was that the guys, Russell Taylor and Charles Petey, they would have lots of contacts into the city, and they would get war stories, and then they would turn them into cartoons. So, just in case you can't read it, we'll do it. So these 2 guys in a bar, wine bar, email may be a marvellous invention, but it's also a curse. Frankly, I get upwards of 150 of the things a day, the vast majority of which are of absolutely no interest or relevance to me. Oh yes, me too. I can't imagine any business person who doesn't find this constant deluge of unwanted electronic messages a source of great frustration and annoyance. Oh, and then it flash forward, so you've got Alex at the front, he's the guy on the right. Oh, show us how this new state-of-the-art BlackBerry gadget works of yours, Alex. Look at the swelling up of pride. He's got something that nobody else has got. It's fantastic. Well, I can check my email. Oh, look, there's one coming through now. So it's absolutely brilliant. So finally, we get some acceptance. We got some momentum into the market as well, and we started to kind of really move forward. And kind of, I wouldn't say things haven't looked back, because things have looked back. Shortly after this, dot-com crash. 9/11, the far more serious things than just the effect to our business, but 9/11 had a big change in IT, think about IT budgets, also the formality, things got very informal. So there was a few steps back, but then momentum forwards. Now, one of the things interesting for this conference, I noticed at the start that Nigel said that all 4 mobile operators are sponsoring this. Well, there are actually 5 mobile operators, but clearly BT does have a spectrum license of its own now for 4G, but clearly is not yet a big enough operator to be able to afford sponsorship of this conference. But I want to just show this a deep piece of financial analysis that was done about how things can sort of change, and it just reminds us of the constancy of some brands. And we've seen BTE is going to be a big thing, so it'll be interesting to see how things go forward. So I just want to show this, and then I just want to conclude after that. So just hold on one sec, and I hope the sound's working as well. Oh.
Meanwhile, big news in the telecom industry: Singular is changing its name to AT&T. It is a crushing blow to those of us who have come to love the Singular trademark, whatever the hell that is. As you no doubt remember, Singular was co-owned by Bell South and SBC, which had been Southwestern Bell and Ameritech, which before that had been Illinois Bell, Wisconsin Bell, Michigan Bell, Ohio Bell, and Indiana Bell. All of those used to be AT&T. A couple of years ago, Singular bought AT&T Wireless and renamed it Singular, but then SBC bought AT&T and changed its own name to AT&T. Then that new AT&T bought Bell South, changing its name to AT&T, making it only logical to turn Singular into AT&T. And down here, too. In other words, thanks to America's antitrust efforts, the country has gone from this to this. Yes, AT&T is the T1000 of corporations. No matter how many pieces you break it into, it always comes back together. So, buy AT&T.
Right, so just one last slide. This is beyond GPRS now. This is more up to date, but it's just, I hope it leads us into maybe the panel and then the afternoon. You might have seen when I had the slide of clients and that. The London 2012 was a client. I chaired one of the committees there, basically to make sure all the mobile phones worked, all the public mobile phones worked anyways. It was multi-stakeholder, had all the mobile operators, Wi-Fi, Mayor's Office, low cog, Cisco very helpful, Uncle Tom Cobley and all, and very high, obviously very high interest levels. And we put in a lot of thinking about learning lessons, looking at different events and things like that before the games. And you can see we absolutely looked at things like the royal wedding, which was what's his face? Prince William and Kate Middleton. The Pope came. There's a Lord Mayor show, like Hyde Park, things like that. The Diamond Jubilee. And we looked at different venues to put a lot of effort in. We also looked more globally. I had Cisco go and give us a report back from the 2011 Super Bowl, because I thought that the kind of device usage that one would see in a stadium in January 2011 in America, we probably would see in June, July 2012 in London. That's actually what happened. So that was really useful. We looked at the Hajj as well. But the interesting thing is, and just want to highlight this to conclude, how quickly things change. The one thing we did not look at, this is London 2012, we were looking in 2011, early 2011, moving on. We did not spend 1 second looking at Beijing 2008. So things are changing so quickly that we didn't look at what was the most recent direct event of the same kind. We thought things would have moved on so rapidly that it wasn't even worth 1 nanosecond our time thinking about Beijing 2008. And so I'll just leave you with that thought about how the early days of GPRS and the move to data, which has led on to the move to video, the move to smartphones, is continuing to move at an ever more rapid rate. And on that, thanks very much indeed.